Okay, dear colleagues, let's continue. Welcome back, and we now continue with the public lecture that will take us into the intersection of research, innovation, and the future of energy and climate security. It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Mattia De Rosa, Associate Professor in Thermal Engineering and Industrial Energy Systems at the University of Genoa. The topic of today's lecture is multidisciplinary dimensions and future trends in research and energy and climate security. Welcome, Professor.
And thank you very much. Thank you very much for the kind of presentation and welcome to this lecture. It's a pleasure for me to be here, and it's an honor to represent my university as well. Today, this lecture is going to be, let's say, we will move to a more technical aspect related to energy security. As you know, that is a very complex topic. Let's try to bring some positivity after the discussion that we had this morning about geopolitics, which was very interesting and quite worrying, but okay. So during this lecture, we'll try to, let's say, move back to the concept of energy security. So we started this event discussing about energy security. I mean, energy security was the main core of our discussion this morning, but we'll try to provide a definition of energy security and to understand the interconnections that energy security has with the different aspects related, what I call the different dimensions related to it. We also briefly talk about climate security, which is of course linked to energy security somehow. But before starting, let's start to define basically what is an energy system. So basically, when we talk about energy security, we implicitly talk about the energy system. So with this term, we actually include all the processes, all the technologies that we have from the source, the resource harvesting and collecting, their transformation and transportation and distribution till the user, so the final consumption. So it's important that when in that big cylinder that you see there, that is flagged as infrastructure, we have actually all the technologies and all the processes. So you can imagine how big this cylinder should be. Of course, we are talking about energy. So we are talking here, we are limiting to the energy resources. Our infrastructure, we discussed it this morning. I heard a lot of information and about the security of this infrastructure. That is, of course, is relevant. Basically, these three blocks describes everything that we have in our energy system. We have our resources, we have our technologies, and we have our consumption, our users. Typically, we extract the resources that we need in order to meet the energy demand, the specific demand in our society. Before getting to that, let's start with the resources, because the concept of resources, energy resources, is particular. It needs to be defined in a correct way. So let's start with what is an energy source. We divide between the concept of energy source with the concept of energy resource. So basically, energy resource is any system that contains energy is an energy source. But then we have to consider that we have several limitations, which can be technological. So we don't have basically the technology to exploit an energy source. Let's think, for example, to the nuclear fusion. We don't have the technology yet to control the process, to control the process and harvest that specific energy. So we have technical constraints. Then we enter into the market concept. We live in a capitalistic market, as we stressed this morning too. So basically, only those resources which are economically exploitable can be considered resources. Some resources, even if they are resources, and even if we possess the technology to harvest them, they might be not convenient from an economic point of view to extract them. So this leads to a concept of resource, of energy resource, which is dynamic. So it changes. It depends on market prices. It depends also on technology, of course, as we said before. It depends also on market barriers that we may have. Market barriers could be also socio-economic barriers. Like, for example, just give you an example, nuclear energy. We discussed it this morning about nuclear energy. I come from Italy, and in Italy we don't have nuclear energy. We had in the past, but after the Chernobyl disaster, we decided that, let's say, the public opinion shifted against nuclear energy. So we shut them down, and we don't have any social support in installing new nuclear power plants. This is a market barrier. So basically, in Italy, we don't have the social support for this kind of energy resource, and we cannot exploit it. The government tries a few times to reintroduce nuclear energy in Italy, and they always found that the public opinion was quite against it, and we had the referendums. And we say no, the population, we as Italian population, I don't represent the Italian population, but let me say we, but we said no. So basically, every attempt to introduce nuclear energy in Italy was stopped. So these are what we call market barriers, just an example. So eventually we end up to the exploitable energy resources. Those are the resources that we can use, we can exploit in a country, which are based on the technology constraints, the market the cost competitivity, so the market, the price constraints, and also the market, so the socioeconomic barriers that we may have. When we talk about energy security, we talk about ensuring that we have enough energy resource supplies that can fuel our economy, our society. And we talk about these exploitable energy resources. So we need to have them, because if we don't, we can get, let's say, disruption in the supply chain, disruption in the industrial productivity, and also socioeconomic tensions. So it's important that when we talk about energy security, we refer to these exploitable energy resources. Another classification, probably most of you are familiar with the difference between primary energies and secondary energies, but basically, when we talk about resources, we talk about primary energies, primary energy forms. So everything that can be harvested in nature, that can reach our country, our border, let's say, which can be the country, can be the European Union, it depends on the size of the analysis that we are carrying out. Any primary energy needs to be converted in order to make them useful for our purpose and based on the type of needs that we have. Then we enter into the secondary energy. So basically, the conversion and storage blocks that you see in this slide represent our infrastructure, the big cylinder that we had before. The primary energy are the resources. The secondary energies are intermediate form of energy that they are generated from primary energy or from secondary energy themselves that are useful in order to transport and distribute and deliver the energy to our final users. The problem we have is that anytime we transform energy, as we know, we lose part of it. So we have what is called the efficiency of the process. So the efficiency of our infrastructure is very important, because higher is the efficiency of our transformation process, lower the primary energy needs will be. So it's important that we measure this efficiency from a, let's say, an holistic way, so from a kind of the energy system at all, to monitor the type of infrastructure that we have, the type of losses that we may have in the process, which is quite complex, can be quite complex, because if you think the type of infrastructures, processes, and technologies that are involved in this value chain is quite, let's say, it's quite huge, it's quite large, and also depends on the type of country, depends on the country, what is called the technology readiness of a country, so it can vary between the different countries. So we end up, so this is the infrastructure. We have the, coming back to our blocks, we have the energy resources, we have the infrastructure, and then we have the final consumption. The final consumption depends on the type of infrastructure that we have, the type of needs that we have. And it's important to define correctly the so-called energy demand, the energy demand of a country or of a sector as well. This can be analyzed both at the sector level, a country level, and so on. Basically, the energy demand is a derived demand. It means that we use energy because we need it to do stuff, to do processes, to fuel our economy, our industrial processes. And it depends on a lot of variables. It depends on the location, on the type of technologies that we are using, and the type of user that we are talking about, if we are talking about an industrial user, a residential user, or so on. And as I said, depends on the lot of parameters. Basically, the energy demand is typically dynamic, so it follows several patterns, which depends on the energy prices. The energy price, as I said, we are in a capitalistic market, so it works like any other market. The price affects the energy demand. Depends on the gross domestic product of a country, of a sector. Depends on the size of the populations, climate variables. Let's think about heating and cooling the buildings, for example, which are actually dependent on the climate, and also others. So basically, understanding the energy demand and forecasting it is essential in order to plan for the energy resource supply, and also to measure the resilience of our energy sector to possible changes in the future. So to forecast the security of our energy supply. We also need to differentiate between energy demand and energy consumption. Energy demand is an ex-ante concept. It means that is something that we forecast. We forecast based on the different parameters and variables that we have identified, and which characterize the specific country. While energy consumption is the actual energy that has been consumed. So it is an ex post analysis and comes from data collected during years by years. So it's like to say that the energy demand is the energy that would be bought or purchased based on the type of needs, the type of the price, the market price, and so on. The final consumption is actually the purchase of energy, so the actual amount of energy that has been purchased after. So is an ex post concept. Sorry. So even if these two terms are often used in an interchangeable way, so we tend to confuse energy demand with energy consumption, and I will confuse them during the lecture, so I apologize for that, to simplify the language at least, but there are two different things. The first one is forecasted, so typically we use them, we analyze the energy demand to forecast our needs, which is the main pillar to understand the energy supply chain and its evolution over time, and so the energy security. The second one is actually a measurement. Is based on data. In terms of, this doesn't mean that we don't use, they cannot be, let's say, useful for each other, because we use data to forecast, to forecast the energy demand. So typically we use historic data, we use the evolution that we have in the history, in the previous years, to understand what the energy demand will do. But typically the energy demand is important from an energy security point of view, as we will see later. These are just some pictures, graphs taken from different studies, just to give you an idea. This is energy consumption, it's not energy demand. So we are seeing historical profiles. You can see divided by the different type of fuels or technologies that we have. We have renewable energies, we have biofuels, we have natural gas, oil, and coal. We can see that over the last, let's say, decades, we had the developments of renewable energy sources that we extensively discussed this morning. But we are still, our society, worldwide society, is still very reliant on fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas. This, of course, stresses the environmental concerns and the climate change that we have experiencing over the last decade, and there is, let's say, attempts to shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy or to a more sustainable way in producing and supplying energy to our society. This doesn't come without issues that we will discuss later, but this is just a picture that ends to 2023. It's just, of course, it's just rising. We had some step back. For example, 2020, you can see the COVID, that we had a reduction of energy consumption. But the trend is quite clear. It should go. We are at the point that we should see it in a logarithmic scale, like the population. Let's talk about the European Union. This is the EU 27, so the 27 countries that form the European Union, and the final energy consumption by sector. This is quite common. I mean, there are different changes or variation among the European countries, but also worldwide. But this is quite typical. So basically, the residential sector, households, the industry sector, and transport sector basically have more or less the same share. Then each country that can have this, their specificity. The residential sector is quite interesting because it includes buildings, of course, so basically heating and cooling energy demand and consumptions, and is one of the main targets at the European Union from a decarbonization point of view. Just to look at the different, this is just a picture of the entire energy sector at the European level. So you can see that we can find again our three blocks. We have the energy supply at your left. We have the infrastructure in which we transform, transport, distribute, and distribute the energy. And then we have the final consumption, the users. So we have these three blocks. These numbers that you find here are in megatons of oil equivalent, and they refer to the 2017. So it's actually, it includes the United Kingdom in the European Union, because it was before Brexit. I mean, they had the referendum, but it was before they actually left the European Union. And you can see the different sectors, transportation, residential, industry, services, and others. So basically, this gives you an idea of how the energy sector works. So we extract energies. We have total production that on your left, the total production includes all the inner production that we have at the inside the European Union. Then we have the net imports, which accounts more than 56% of our let's say, primary energy supply. The European Union is a net importer country, so basically we import a lot of energy, of primary energy from third countries. In particular, it's Russia. Well, it is actually changing, I will show you later some data, but basically we import more than 50–60% of our energy needs, which creates an issue from an energy security point of view, as we will see later. So we reach to the gross available energy. This is actually the primary energy that we have at our border. Then we start the transformation and distribution. So they start all the processes in which primary energy is transformed in secondary energy energies are transformed in secondary energy, and so on till we reach the final consumption. During the process, we lose energy because each transformation comes with some losses in terms of energy. Then we get to the available for final consumption. This is distributed between non-energy final consumption, like production of material and so on, and then we have transport, the different sectors in which the energy sector is typically divided. The market size, you see some data on the bottom. So the market size of the energy sector is actually over the 20 billion of euro. It employs more than 1.5 million of people, so it's quite a huge sector. We consume 12% of the total energy consumption worldwide, even if we produce only 5.6%. Only from this number, you can see that we are quite unbalanced from this point of view. So we import more than we import a lot of energy in order to cover our energy needs. These are other tables that you can find in this paper. Actually, that is open access. You will find the link this document. But anyway, you can see also the different. The first table on the top describes the final energy consumption. Sorry, the total energy supply in megatons of oil equivalent shared from across the different type of energy resources. So we have solid fossil fuels, which is basically coal. Then we have oil, natural gas. The first three are the fossil fuels. And then we have renewables and nuclear. We can see that we have a decrease in use of solid fossil fuels. There is a phase out of coal power plants in the European Union across, in particular in Germany, in Italy, and less in the eastern countries. There are some countries that still relies on coal power plants. Oil and oil products, which include also, this includes everything. So we are talking about all the sectors, so transportation. Our transportation sector is still highly reliant on fossil fuels, on oil products, and natural gas. The renewables, we had a large increase, huge is a strong word. Let's say that the percentage of energy supply from renewable energy actually increases over time. Over the last decades, these are basically due to the EU policy, the EU decarbonization policies, and all the incentives that were put on developing renewable energy sources. The European Union and also the single country actually, let's say, funded a lot of solar and wind energy over the past. Professor Palonetto actually described this morning something that happened in Italy regarding the solar energy. And then we have a steady decrease of the nuclear energy. This, in those years, actually happened at Fukushima. So we had a phase out from the German nuclear power plants in that period. In terms of sector, we already described before, basically, the different shares, the shares across the different sectors, that doesn't change too much. Over time, they are practically constant with some deviation. Then we can see some metrics related to the energy intensity, to the energy sector in the European Union. These are actually spread to the different countries. I remind you that there is also the UK, because these data refer to the 2017. So now they are a bit changed, and this actually work should be repeated with updated data. The problem is that we are actually living in a very dynamic period from a geopolitical point of view. So there has been shift from the imports and production that we had, from the resources that we have in the country. So this will be done, and is part of our agenda. Anyway, you can see the energy intensity of the economy, which actually is the ratio between the energy consumption divided the GDP of each country. Then we have the share of electricity production from renewables. You can see that we have a steady increase for almost all the countries. And the share of fossil fuels. Most of the European countries are still reliant, as I said, to fossil fuels for most of their consumption, for most of their supply. That even if it's decreasing, thanks to the European agenda, the decarbonization agenda, we have still a lot of work to do. And as I said, we are a net importer. We are net importer countries. So most of our energy actually comes from third countries, with some exceptions like Denmark, like the UK in the past, at least, and so on. This is a picture of what happened before the Russia and Ukraine crisis. You can see that most of our imports were from Russia. So this creates a problem when the European Union decided to put sanctions on the Russian Federation due to the Russian and Ukrainian war outbreak. Because simply we couldn't afford to shut down completely the imports from the Russian Federation. This is not something that you can do from like turning the light on and off. This is something that needs to be planned. And replacing all these imports from in one day, 1 year, is not something feasible. That's why we had, there were a lot of discussion in the European Union at that time in 2022 on we need to shut down the gas imports, the natural gas imports, the oil imports. And that it didn't happen actually in the first stage of the war. They had to plan. So when you shift from one import channels to another one, you need to plan. You need to find actually the other one. And it doesn't. It depends also on the type of the market price that you might have in the other market that you are trying to get your natural gas from. Take into account that the natural gas market, at least in Italy, is based on a long-term contract, typically linked to oil, to the oil price. It's difficult to know the extent of these contracts because typically they have non-disclosure agreements, so they are industrial secrets, this kind of contract. But basically, they are linked somehow to the oil price. And they are pluriannual contracts. So basically, we have the companies like Eni, Enel in Italy have an agreement with Gazprom, for example, from the Russian Federation, to buy a certain amount of gas at that price, or the price actually is fluctuating following the oil price, which are convenient in the long term because you have an agreement in the long term. So disrupting completely that channel, import channel, and replacing them comes with a cost because you need to get into another and requires time and money. So you need to enter into another market. You need to start, let's say, some discussion with the other entities, get new contracts. So it's something that takes time and costs money. That's why it didn't happen. Well, it is happening with in the long run. So let's move to the energy security. Sorry for the layout of the presentation. It was like this, but I hope it works anyway. So when we talk about energy security, we need to provide a definition of what is energy security. Typically, the definition that you find at the top of this slide is actually the one provided by the International Energy Agency. So we talk about a reliable and adequate supply of energy at reasonable cost. So we have also the market price perspective in the concept of energy security is in no sense to have, I mean, it's not useful to have a large amount of energy which costs a fortune. It's not sustainable for us. So, despite this a simple definition, if you think, it's not actually so simple because it involves a lot of dimensions. Some of them we were discussed this morning. We talk about energy availability. You see the key areas, so energy availability. We talk about infrastructure. We discussed it this morning about the infrastructure. We talk about market and prices. We have the environmental perspective, so long-term sustainability, energy efficiency, demand reduction, and so on. We have the social aspect that Professor Pallonetto discussed this morning related to energy poverty, energy equality, and so on. We have geopolitical aspects that we discussed also this morning. It was quite worrying, actually, the discussion that we had this morning. We are at the edge of the Third World War, but it's important to include the geopolitics, a part of the joke, but it's important to include geopolitics inside the energy security because it's based on because energy resources are not widespreadly distributed, and they are actually concentrated in specific area of the globe. So we have, and in those areas we have countries, then the energy needs to transport it, and they cross energy like fuels, oil, and natural gas crosses countries, country borders. So the geopolitical aspect is very important. And then we have the data security that was actually very effectively discussed this morning. So all these, the question that arises, and is actually a research question that is actually outstanding, how we include all these dimensions inside an energy security assessment. You can see that it's quite complex to take into account all these aspects. So typically it's actually unpacked in different aspects with links in the different dimensions, with links between each other. Also the strategies related to the energy security, so sorry if I come back, understanding all these dimensions is a political decision, basically. So it depends on the type of country, the country that we are talking about, the geopolitical and the economic context a country is actually which is specific for each country. Typically, in a very general, very, sorry if I stress this term, very general terms, we can divide the different countries into 4 categories. As I said, it's very general, so there are a lot of specificities across the globe. But we can see that the first one is the industrialized net energy importers, like the European Union. So the European Union actually is included in the first one, most of the countries at least. So the problem here that we have is that we have in Europe is that we are importers, so we need to supply energy from third countries. We need to be sure that this energy is actually supplied and arrives at our border. So we want to avoid the energy supply disruption, but on the other side, we also want to minimize our dependency to specific energy value chains. So basically the strategies that the European Union, I'll show you a picture later about the strategy of the European Union, is based on the diversification of the energy resources in terms of both energy resources types, technologies, but also from an import point of view. So having different supply chains. Then we have the hydrocarbon exporting countries. This is Russia, basically. It's not only Russia, but there are other countries. But the Russian Federation falls in this category. In this kind of country, the main target is to have to ensure that we have enough markets where we can sell our energy resources because we are exporting them. This is so that is why, for example, after the war, we were saying that the European Union was had a lot of difficulties to disrupt completely and stop completely the imports from the Russian Federation. We were too reliant on that. But on the other side, also the Russian Federation is reliant on our imports. So on us that we buy their gases, because to bring gases around, you can have gas pipelines, and we had an extensive network from Siberia, so from the Russian Federation to Europe, which cost a lot. It's an infrastructure, it's an energy infrastructure that needs to be planned, requires a lot of investment, and it requires time to be established. So it means that diverting the export to another channel is not as easy as it seems for the Russian Federation as well. That's why they were targeting the natural gas somehow. So the stability of export markets is fundamental for this kind of markets. They also try to secure investment in order to develop new pipelines, new infrastructure, new like gasification systems in order for example, to sell liquefied gas natural gas and so on. So diversification of market, export in this case, and infrastructure expansion and upgrade. Then we had the other two categories, just quickly. The first one is we are talking about large emerging developing countries. The specificity of these kind of countries that they have a quite fast growing energy demand. So the energy demand is not stable, but it's actually increasing at a very fast rate, which means that they need to cope with this increase. They need to have secure investments in order to build up new infrastructure in order to supply the energy they need. The middle income energy importers are quite similar, so they have a stagnant energy consumption. We are talking about basic energy needs. The problem is the access. Their problem is the access to the global energy market, which can be costly for a low middle income countries. So, as I said, this classification is quite general, and it actually neglects all the specificities that you have that you may find. But you can see that at least you have 4 macro approach to the energy security in this table. As we said, the energy security needs to be assessed. So we need to know the evolution of the energy demand. We need to know the specificities that we have in each country, and we need to assess which factors actually are affecting our energy security, our energy supply chain, and also energy security. So we already discussed most of these points, so I don't want to spend too much time. Also, please stop me when it's time, because I tend to speak a lot. One of the important aspects that I want to stress is the diversification of the energy supply, which we will talk soon enough, because it's one of the first pillars of energy security. From a European point of view, as we said, we are import countries. Sorry if I said it, I think it's the 10th time I say that. But the problem is that let's say the policy of the European Union is to diversify the energy supply, to diversify the energy form, the energy technologies that we employ in our countries. We rely a lot on renewable energies, even with all the problems that they may cause in terms of stability, for example, stability of the grid, and so on. For the European Union, also the environmental concern is an important pillar. So we need to be sure that what we implement and what we do as a policy is actually sustainable in long term. And this is actually the huge challenge, because from one side we have the market prices that typically favor the fossil fuels, and on the other side we have this push towards the decarbonization and the sustainability of our energy sector. So how can we conjugate them is an outstanding research question. So we are trying to find ways. We discussed it this morning about sustainable energy communities and so on, but it's still an outstanding question. Basically, as I said, the EU approach is based on renewable energy resources and diversification of fossil fuels. This is more or less the two pillars of the energy security in the European Union. Of course, we have security issues. So the security of the infrastructure is an important aspect that that is taken into account seriously at the European level. And and still we have work to do in terms of integration of markets at the European level. So in particular for the gas market, that is not integrated at all and is still, as I said, based on long-term contract. We are switching to a global, a more dynamic market, a spot market also for the gas, but still undergoing. So as we saw, there are a lot of discussion. I mean, the word diversification came a lot during this lecture. The diversification of the energy supply is actually the first pillar that was introduced in terms of to assess, or at least to discuss about energy security. The first one who actually mentioned something like that is quite similar was Sir Winston Churchill in 1910. He said safety and certainty in oil. Of course, at that time we were talking about oil and oil imports, which was quite strategic for the British Empire at that time. Safety and certainty in oil lie in variety alone. So this was quite an advanced thinking at that time, where we didn't have any oil crash prices, oil market disruption, and so on. So it was quite advanced because actually, if you think, he's talking about the diversification of the oil supply in this case. So what is the definition? So actually the assumption of the diversification of the energy supply. The assumption is that having a more diverse energy supply leads to a less reliance on single energy sources, so to a more secure supply of energy. So if we have multiple choices in terms of energy sources, energy imports, and so on, even if one of these value chain is disrupted, we still can cope with that. The problem is when we have only one channel. So when the market is concentrated and we only have one supply chain, and if that supply chain is disrupted, we are in trouble. So the diversification of energy supply talks about the variety. So the number of categories, in our case, is the number of energy resources that we have available. This is the first thing that we can define. So how many energy sources we have access to, and also where they are, because if they are all in a single place, just to simplify the matter, if they are geographically concentrated, we still might have a security issue there. So we are talking, so the variety includes the number of energy resources and their distribution across the country, for example. Then we have the balance, so the spread of total distribution of these categories, of these energy resources across the total. Even if we have a large number of energy resources available, but 99% of our energy supply relies on one source only, is not diversified. We are still a concentration there. So we need to consider also the balance between them all. And then we have the disparity. So how much diverse the different supply chain are different, sorry for the repetition, are different among others. So even if we have, just give you an example, if we have a wide number of energy resources available, but they are all of them are dependent on a single supply chain, like a single infrastructure. You can think about a single infrastructure. We still have a problem because they have connection points between them, and if that infrastructure is actually disrupted, all of them can get into trouble. So this is the concept of diversification. It also includes the diversification. When we talk about technology, I put down on the table as a technology diversification, but this includes also the imports. So the diversification of imports, the diversification of the imports value chains are also important. That's what the problem we had with the Russian Federation. We were a lot reliant on 3 fossil fuel resources: coal, oil, and natural gas from one single country. And that creates, is not a secure energy supply. So this gives you just an example. These were calculations that we made in the past with those data that I showed you before, are based on the Shannon-Wiener index that measured the diversity of a population, basically. The Shannon-Wiener index comes from biology, ecology, and it was introduced to measure the variety of an ecosystem. The same concept can be used in the market, to understand how market is diverse, and also in the energy sector. The energy sector, in this case, we have 3 actually Shannon index. The first one, so first of all, higher is the Shannon index, better it is. More diverse is the energy supply. First. Second, the first one measured only the energy resources available, so the number, the categories, the variety of the categories that we have. In the second one, we measure also the import dependency. So we introduce somehow in the calculation of this index, that I didn't put the equations because there is no point now, but they are nothing complex, but I mean, it takes time to explain, and we lose the point of the lecture. So in this case, we include also, we measure also where this energy comes from. So how the imports, the different value chains are diverse. And the third one, we also measure how secure a specific imports is from a third country. So introducing a kind of geopolitical stability index. So it's one thing to have an energy flow from Armenia, another one having from Ukraine, you know, in this period that we are living now. So with this index, we actually measure also where they come from, and also which country actually crosses the energy flows. Russian gas, for example, cross the Baltic area, Belarus, and also Ukraine, for example. So there is a huge risk. This is done for all the countries and for the European Union at level. We won't comment, I mean, the numbers, but this is a kind of example of a methodology that we can use in order to measure the diversification of the energy supply. Another index that can be used is the HHI index. Don't ask me to pronounce those 2 names. Apologize, but I cannot. So we will call it HHI index. And it measures the concentration of the market. So basically, more the market is concentrated, and the higher is going to be this index. So basically, if this index is equal to 1, it means that we are in a monopoly. So we have only one option, one market is fully concentrated, one option inside the market. Of course, we have special cases like Cyprus and Malta that, because of their geographic specificity, they have a market concentration. So this is a picture of the European Union as it was before COVID, actually. These numbers changed, so this is a disclaimer from my side. This number changed because of Kodi, in particular because of the Russian-Ukrainian war that moved the balance from one import to another. It's too early to remeasure it because everything is actually changing. It's quite dynamic, the history that we are living right now. But it will be done. Then, just to conclude our lecture, just few words about the role of energy efficiency and renewable energies. We talk about energy supply mostly in this presentation. So we have an energy demand, and the energy supply typically follows the energy demand. So we need to supply enough energy to meet our needs. But we can also reduce our needs. So the energy efficiency is one of the strategies that can be used by a country in order to reduce their reliance on importation. This is particularly important for European countries, which, as I said for the 15 times, is a net importer country. So it's important that we reduce the energy demand. And the energy efficiency measures leads to the reduction of the final energy consumption and as a consequence of the energy supply that we need. Of course, and on the other side, we have the renewable energies. The renewable energies are energies that are generated locally. So it means that we remove completely the import, the risk associated with the global market and the risk of the importation, but it still has their problem. So we can increase the resilience that can be distributed across the country. So we can also respect the variety from a geographical point of view. Of course, that creates other problems, like we need robust and reliable infrastructures. In particular, if you think about the national grid, the national grid needs to be able to cope with the uncertainty associated with the production of renewable electricity from renewable resources. This is one of the aspects. And also, if you think we don't avoid importation at all, because we don't import energy in this case, but we need to make, for example, solar panels, and they're made of materials that are called the critical raw materials, what they're called critical raw materials. Solar panels that don't grow in a tree like an apple, or the wind turbine doesn't pop up like a mushroom. No, we need to build them, and to build them we need materials, and these materials are critical and strategic from an economic global global market. Also because the European Union again is quite poor in terms of resources. We are not lucky, sorry, but but we don't have a lot of resources of these critical raw materials. I can provide some pictures about those. So basically, the demand of these materials is increasing because we need them for batteries, for wind turbines, for any electronic or electric components, for the solar panels in particular. And most of them comes, sorry, I just skip this one, comes, as you can see, from third countries. So we are actually importing more than 85% of these critical raw materials. And this creates geopolitical tensions inside the market. Or at least, if you want to see on the other way around, geopolitical tension can disrupt the supply of these critical raw materials. So what's the answer from the European Commission, in this case, and the European Parliament? We have, they set several benchmarks. So first of all, you can find online, I can provide you some references. There is, the European Union actually created a list of critical and strategic raw materials, which are two different classifications, basically, and set some benchmarks. Now up to the 2030, which is quite approaching, is quite fast. So at least 10% of the extraction of these raw materials should happen inside the European Union border. We need to process them because also the facility to process the raw materials is actually now abroad. So it's not the raw material itself, but we are actually importing material that has been already processed. And this creates other bottlenecks in our economy, in our industrial capabilities. So the European Union wants that at least 40% of this processing should be done inside the European Union. Then we should increase the recycling and the recovering of the materials. And again, we have the diversification, if you see. So the European Union does want that at least not more than 65% of the critical raw material, whatever it is, comes from a single third country. So they are pushing for a diversification of the critical raw materials. So this is the agenda that currently the European Union has implemented, and it has also implemented monitoring schemes in order to monitor exactly the flows of these materials and if we are reaching these numbers. And we are not. If I may say, we are not, but we are in the process. Okay. So the last part of this, I don't know if I still have time or you want to keep me out. Okay. Just quickly, we talk about energy security, which refers to the energy sector. And then we saw that we also have, briefly, problems from a material point of view. But when we talk about energy security is one of the aspects of a broad, let's say, wider let's say concept that is called a country resilience and climate security. Why? Because the climate security is let's say comes given that we won't meet the decarbonization targets. So let's say it's a contingency plan that we need to put in place in order to manage and mitigate and manage the changes that we will experience due to the climate change. The energy sector is actually the infrastructure, and we will see that it will enter inside this broader concept of climate security. Basically, what is climate security? How we assess it? We need to understand exactly, first of all, the type of threats that climate change can bring to our society. When I say society, means economic, socio-economic, and industrial, from an industrial point of view, and also from an ecosystem point of view. We need to understand which are for example, the percentage of population that are affected by by the climate change. Like, for example, the sea level rise. Most of the world population actually lives in coastal areas. Climate change, sea level rises can stress also economic and social tensions that we may have. We may have migrations following this. So it's important that we divide in the different dimensions, again, the climate security, and we find a way to assess the risk. There is a nice, it's not nice because it's actually quite worrying, the perspective, so it's not nice, but let's say that, let's use the word interesting. A report from the European Climate Risk Assessment, which is quite recent, is from last year, 2024. It was the European Union actually created a working group, in order to assess the risk associated with climate change. And they target different clusters, you see, as you can see in the picture. We have the food production, human health and well-being, land and water ecosystems, critical infrastructure, including the energy sector. The energy sector falls in this category, economy and finance. So in this, what did they do? They actually, country by country and sector by sector, identified and measured somehow the risk associated with climate change, the probability that we might have disruption in one of these clusters, and the relations between the different clusters. So the synergies between the cluster, which can be positive or negative. So an action in one of the for example, in the food cluster could affect positively or negatively another cluster. So they analyze this kind of interaction between the different clusters, because the clustering process is useful because it simplifies the problem, but we never we need to remind that everything is interconnected. Our society is more complex than these clusters. So we need to analyze the different these synergies. And what they do, based on this first assessment, which is the first line risk assessment, they introduced monitoring processes. Sorry, in order to understand how these scenarios that they developed, actually they are going on, and they suggested a policy, precautionary policy. So basically, country by country, actually they put in charge the different countries that at that point to they encourage the different countries to create precautionary policies. So based on scenario analysis on different actions that can be put in place in case specific events occurs. And then there are other two pillars which are always relevant, is investing in social justice and cohesion. So we need to work together, basically what the European Union is saying, that we need to work together on this. We must avoid to leave single countries alone in facing different specific threats and issues. And also social justice, so we need to be sure that everyone is actually can get access to the same support as anyone else. And then this is the last point, is the most controversial, at least is the one that is still going on and there are discussion, is based on understanding who are the owner of the risk. If it is at the state national level, if it is a European level, if it is a company private level, and so on, and to analyze any potential barriers at governance level, country level, but not only country, can be local, regional, national, and the European level barriers that may actually reduce the possibility of action in or the implementation of these policies. So I finished. I hope it was interesting at least. And if you have any questions, please. There is one there.
Okay, now it's working. I wanted to, it's more in the form of comment, but I would like to hear also your thoughts, of course. If you go back to the slide where you were talking about the difference between energy sources, how they're procured, the chain and so on, right? Yeah, here. So you had variety, balance, and then disparity. One thing that I think I will add here is looking at the point of consumption, not the variety, not the difference, but the opposite, the substitutability, let's say, of an energy source. In a sense that, for example, you could diversify your energy sources, and let's say you use gasoline in transportation and you use renewables in electricity and so on, but if you have a gasoline disruption, you can't replace gasoline with electricity because your cars are not electric, whereas you could replace it with biogas, for example. Or even if we just look within the electricity sector, you can increase the share of solar and wind, but you can't replace gas with them because they don't provide baseload. You would have to look into nuclear. So that's what I mean in a sense. You want them to have diversified in terms of where they're coming from and logistics and so on, but you want, if if they are not able to substitute each other at the point of function or consumption, if there is a disruption, then it doesn't help as much, right? Because a disruption in one place, you will not be able to substitute it with other sources. So I think that's one important metric here that I will add, how well they are able to replace each other in case one of the energy sources is not supplied.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, yes, of course. What you refer in a broader term is the flexibility of our energy system. So basically, how flexible we are and how resilient we are in exchanging, is our actual economy or industrial facility in exchanging energy sources. Yes, of course, this should be included, and it is included. Take into account that the energy, we are talking about energy supply right now, and actually the diversification of the energy supply, which is only one pillar of the energy security. So it's important to understand that what we described in that part of the presentation is only one aspect, one dimension. And of course you have also the others, like the security of the infrastructure, the interchangeability of these energy sources, that is actually linked with the technology that you have, which depends on the country and the infrastructure that you have. So this is only one part of the story, let's say, that we focus more in this presentation. There are others, like what we discussed this morning, that of course it's a complex matter. We cannot cover everything in 45 minutes. Yeah, thank you.
It is estimated that by 2030, the total production of energy will reach 4 terawatts from current 1.8 terawatts. For example, in the United States in 2025, it is the decision by Donald Trump to construct $500 billion AI infrastructure. And in Europe, France decided to invest $112 billion in constructing AI infrastructure and data centers. And so I wonder, could production of modular nuclear power facilities in the United States and in Europe, large amount of considerable large amount of such facilities to reduce the import of oil and gas from Russia and other countries?
Well, that is a problem. It's a problem that is related with the stability. I think that's my perspective, at least with the stability of the national grid. So basically, we cannot think of having a full substitution of fossil fuels, as the previous speaker said, with renewable energies. So we still need to have a base load somehow, and now the only way we have is with fossil fuel. We also need to consider that we live in a capitalistic economy, which is based on a continuous growth of us, so of our economy, of our population, and everything. So consequently, since the energy demand, as I said at the beginning, is linked with those numbers, so it's linked with the population, it's linked with GDP and so on, for sure it will increase. How to cope with that is a political matter. Let's say that we will reach a stress point in which the energy demand will be adjusted in an economic point of view, from a market point of view. Because as in any capitalistic market, if we have a lack of resources, the price of that resources will rise. And then we'll make other resources available, or other technology, or the development of new technology. So it's difficult to know what is going to be in the future. As I think Fabiano said this morning, we don't have the crystal ball, but we know that is going to be a problem. So this continuous rise in terms of economy, population, and so on will stress our society in general. And the energy consumption is one aspect of this stress. That's my perspective, at least. Okay, I'm done. Thank you very much.
Okay, now let's move to our final session of the day, a panel discussion titled The Role of Research in Enhancing Energy Security. This session brings together experts from academia, international organizations, and public institutions to explore how research can drive solutions, inform policy, and support long-term energy resilience. The panel will be moderated by Alena Mirkhanyan, the director of Acopian Center for the Environment. Welcome, Ale.
Thank you very much. If you thought the first panel was provocative, let's now wait for this one. Dr. Diana Hartunian, who is a climate policy expert at UNDP, and I call her the queen of climate change in Armenia. And she basically knows everything and everyone in this field. So please join us. Dr. Tikran Gnuni, we're very delighted to have you here, a Deputy Director of Scientific Research Institute of Energy. He is the National Institutional Memory on Energy, so we're very happy to have him join us. Followed by Dr. Haik Agarmazian from the Polytechnic University. He is very much interested in topics like the critical raw materials and how do you make the energy transition work, because it all depends on if you have the materials to produce the equipment and the facilities that is going to ultimately enable the green transition, the energy transition. And Dr. Vahan Sarkisyan, from the Director of the Energy Strategy Center at the Scientific Research Institute of Energy. He has been on the forefront, if not the author of many of the strategy papers that the government has ultimately adopted. And Dr. Marina Vartanyan, formerly USAID, and currently joining us injured in a swimming pool accident, was it? Yes, sorry to hear that. And as USAID has disappeared, for now at least, she was with USAID Armenia for many years in the water energy sector now, and then she moved to Moldova. She was managing a humongous energy portfolio on behalf of USAID for the Moldovan government, and now she is back to Armenia, and we're putting her back to work. And she's also involved in EU Horizon Europe and other framework programs of the European Union evaluating proposals. So you need to be nice to her, right? Okay, so with this, let me also here. There we go. All right, can you guys hear me? Is that okay? Thank you everyone for agreeing to join this discussion. Our conversation is going to be not about the problems of the world, but what is the role of research in solving the problems of the world, and specifically energy security and energy transition. And in this respect, let me start with Diana, who I have known from almost the first day I've been to Armenia, and you have been a close advisor to the government of Armenia, Ministry of Environment on environmental topics, specifically climate change, and you have also led several of the major national communications on climate change, which is very data intensive, very research intensive. You've worked with the best and the brightest in the country. What were your frustrations in terms of conducting research, doing research, and producing a research document?
This is interesting that to remember my first work with the first national communication and scientists which were involved in the preparation of this national communication. I was proud to know these people, and because they was based on the legacy of the Soviet science and established institutions, many years of knowledge and schools around these professors. And for now, the most gap which I see, we don't have stable units, which are, because science is need institutional capacity, it needs permanence of the funding, and needs continuity in the knowledge transfer. When you are breaking these links with the school, when you don't have secure funding, but the most important thing, when the state is not valuing this science for its policy development, for its development, and it's not accidentally that the only science that is somehow is finding the funds, it's for the security-related issues in the for the army or something, which is also weaker and weaker here. The science don't have permanent financing, and here for these years we see, and maybe the people who are sitting also around the panel here are facing this, that if there will be international grants, if there will be no international cooperation, maybe even this last islands of science and knowledge can disappear, because the funding for these critical things that today we are discussing, analysis of energy, analysis of the climate change related risks, all these need sustainability, which is absent. So, and we are relying on such sporadic financing, sporadic grants, and even we yesterday was discussing how the dropping the USAID funding for the energy analysis, energy, this market opening, all this project that was for many years was helping to shape the institutions in energy sector is dropping. We see also that there is no for more than a year, we don't have deputy minister responsible for energy. So it means that we don't have political importance given to this, but from another side, energy is is backbone of the security of the country. And the last presentation was speaking about how Europe is considering energy issue as a security issue, and then putting efforts in analyzing and understanding in what direction to develop, how to see the challenges, and Armenia also. The previous speakers were speaking about in what situation we are. We need to cope with all these challenges, which is very much linked also related to the climate, because we are landlocked. We are very much we are also blocked and politically very vulnerable, considering of all analysis. And so the balanced and scientifically studies which have to give the proper signals for policymakers is absent, because there is no order importance given to the science. This is my gap analysis.
All right, so there's a couple of things you said there, and I think it would be good to keep them apart. One is that the funding level you're saying is not high. It has increased substantially. It's 2 or 3 times more than it was before in terms of funding of research and science. But this other aspect that you're focusing on that is specifically focused on energy security, energy transition, the issue is not well formulated, the policy issues are not well formulated, therefore funding is not dedicated to solving those policy issues. So that's one set of issues.
This is prioritization issue.
Yeah,
of
prioritization, but that comes from policymakers.
Yeah.
But also, because I'm one of the people who believes there's no shortage of money. Okay, there's a shortage of someone saying, this is my problem, can you solve it? because there's money everywhere. You can
find the money, yes,
yes,
you are right.
there's research money abundant. It's just you need to have the capacity to go after that very competitive money. It's not going to be easy to get, but you have to be there and compete. But there's never, it's very sad to hear that another state is defining Armenia's energy priority securities through donor funding or whatever, right? So it is very much a state issue to identify the challenges and put the question that needs to be researched. So these are very two important directions you've highlighted, and so we'll come back to you because there's you have worked with people actually, and you've developed a lot of the database that we need to continue to use and build on. Dr. Genouni, if I could ask you, you have been in this field of energy for many years. What would you say would be the main challenges of energy security in Armenia requiring more research? So what is it that's not being researched enough?
Our previous lecture was very interesting from the point of view of the energy security, and I could say that all the field of the energy security, all the dimension of energy security, which was mentioned previously, is very important for Armenia. But we have also some maybe specific aspects. First of all, it is the big problem of our long-term development, long-term program development is uncertainty of the future challenges in economy of Armenia, in geopolitical situation in Armenia. For example, the GDP aspect was mentioned in the previous lecture, but what means GDP? GDP means not only growth of GDP, but it also means the challenges of the structure of GDP, which is influence to the energy demand in the country. The other aspect, energy security and energy independence. It is very big relationship between these two aspects, but energy independence in Armenia, for example, we make a decision years ago about developing small HPP, for example. What was the result? We spent
those are hydropower plants, right? Small hydropower plants.
Oh, small hydropower plant. What was the result? The result was the spend of economically available hydro potential. Now the utilization of hydro potential become to the slowest steps. About the solar energy, it is also huge possibility to Armenian power sector, energy sector, to develop photovoltaic solar energy, but it creates additional risk for power system of Armenia. We come in the situation when developing of the so-called auto producers or our auto consumers, they influence to the quality of the voltage in Armenia. From one side, from other side, it is variable energy resources which don't give possibility to dispatch such energy. And it creates the problem which is known about our decision maker to develop also energy storage in Armenia. But there is again question arise for very interesting from the point of view for the future research. what kind of the storage we should develop. From one side, we have experience, especially in the developed country, to develop the electrochemical, such called the electrochemical storages, like lithium-ionium storages, accumulators. But from other hand, we have also the other experience to develop hydropump storages, which from my point of view, much more important for Armenia from the regulation point of view. It is more or less traditional, storage, and we call this like the secondary regulation reserve. In the field of the electrochemical battery, we haven't such a good experience. Developing of the electromobiles in Armenia. You know, we have in Armenia today growth of the using electromobiles, but this is the, again, research problem about the energy security supply in the medium and low level electrical grid. In this case, another problem is the new nuclear unit in Armenia. This is very important for Armenia from the point of view of the energy security, but there is a lot of questions which should be studied in case of the what should be capacity of the nuclear power plant. It should be small nuclear power plant, or it should be huge one. It is dependent of our developing of our interconnection with the neighboring country. Finally, I should say that the problem of energy security in Armenia is a very complicated and have a lot of the direction which can be researched and which can be interested and which should be interested for our young researchers.
Thank you. You're raised areas of research that, of course, require national level attention and formulation of the challenge. I know Ministry of Economy commissioned the Berlin Economics through funding of the German government to do a study of battery storage solutions for Armenia. They did something similar on hydrogen a while back. So the question arises, and I don't want to criticize necessarily, it's always good for ministries to get multiple opinions, but I've never seen a ministry in Armenia commission a report for Armenian researchers to do the analysis. What is going on there? Maybe I can ask this question from Vahan.
Thank you, Alan. Generally speaking, you are a little bit not right, because during all our, starting from 1994, all decisions of our Ministry of Energy was based on the researches done for long-term development, based on the long-term development plans, which was done by under foreign investment with foreign companies together with Armenian experts. And almost all of these reports are published, and you can find them. Unfortunately, not always all the recommendations done within these plans, long-term development plans, was included and agreed by government to include in the strategy. But anyway, yes, it was, and until 2 years ago, the last least cost energy plan was developed. It was submitted to the ministry for their future decision making. So that's all. And in addition, I would like, if I can, I would like to say that from the scientific point of view, we need scientists. Yeah, our companies need more discussion with wide discussion with policymakers, with decision makers, with society. They should know what we are doing, what kind of problem are in the system, and how we are going to solve them, to have maybe both direction of interactions and to finding some solutions to solve this such a problems which we are seeing, scientists are seeing, and are providing our knowledge to the other people.
So science communication and impact of research still remains an issue, because there's always not, frequently there's lack of mechanisms of how to deliver this research to the policymakers.
Right.
Am I correct?
Right.
Diana, you were going to say
Absolutely.
something? Yeah, go ahead.
Last list cost analysis, how it was presented and how it was discussed.
Can you because not everyone knows list cost analysis.
This list cost analysis, it means this was Vahan was citing this analysis, which are showing the opportunities for low cost energy, electrical energy supply. It's not total energy supply. And from this point of view, this electrical energy, we can say power list cost analysis, the last one was lacking two things, and here it's coming that it was not state ordered. There was nothing mentioned about nuclear power plant, and there was nothing mentioned about exchange, bartering energy with the Iran, which is also when we are preparing national communication for greenhouse gas emissions, we see the huge impact on our emissions and our targets from these two main energy sources, how they are used, because first one is zero carbon emitting technology, and if we are taking targets and thinking about Armenian strategy of security and independence, we can't go on without nuclear power plant. And secondly, we can't avoid importance of our neighbor Iran in our exchange and also for regulation. I think my colleagues are specialists in this, for the renewable energy in the summer. It can be regulated if it will be proper exchange with Iran, because in summer we can exchange a lot of energy to Iran because there is demand, and in the winter to have back. But in any case, the carbon cost is absent in this, because we are supplying energy, clean energy to Iran, and the CO2 emissions are remaining on Armenian balance. So these are things that are interconnected, climate policy and energy policy, which was absent from the last list cost analysis, because to be honest, it was ordered by USAID. So it was not Armenian government required analysis. So Vahan, I want to argue on that with that point of view with you, because there is also no political discussion was about your report when you are presenting this list cost analysis.
Now, Marina, don't defend USAID necessarily in this, but it would be good to know kind of this other country, Moldova, and you having worked at USAID for many years, you also saw post-Soviet space, how they dealt with these issues. So give us some perspective on how some of these other countries have dealt with these challenges, which I'm sure is not unique to Armenia.
Yeah, thank you. It's kind of interesting questions. Especially I work in Armenia, in Vietnam, in Moldova, but now I will be comparing Armenia and Moldova, because they are countries of similar size with the Soviet legacy, but then they go with having disputed territories both. But then they went through the different paths because of geographic location, because of Moldova has a border with the European Union, getting a lot of support from Romania, having a vision probably to be in the European Union within 10 years, when Armenia talking about 20 years. And also they have a gas market, and that raises a huge demand for the research. For example, they ask, it's driven by you, it's done by USAID, but I should say it's always driven to some extent by the country. Same was in Armenia. The only thing that US government put there that we are not going to look at Iran Energy Institute plus add Iran to the table. All others been kind of discussed at the very high level with the Deputy Prime Minister, etc. But coming back to Moldova, we did, for example, research for the winter 2024-25, then a long-term research for the gas market. We looked at the LNG, whether it will be Qatar, US, what kind of, whether gas will come through Ukraine or Bulgaria, Polska, etc. So there is a lot of space for research in the gas sector for Moldova. It was very important. We did also, not a least cost, but we did a studies for the energy resources, which was basis for their energy strategy until 2050. We did for the climate change a lot of research. They came up with the climate change strategy. They are member of the energy community, and a lot of demand for research are coming there. In difference from Armenia, now unfortunately, Ministry of Energy is diluted in the Ministry of Infrastructure and maybe less demand coming for the research. But in Moldova, the opposite process went. They kind of divided Ministry of Energy from the Ministry of Infrastructure. Now they have a relatively strong Ministry of Energy with 3 deputy ministers looking at different kind of energy efficiency, renewable energy, 1 deputy minister, another gas market, electricity market. They have Romanian operators of the market in Moldova. They don't have their own operator. Armenia has their own operator. In Moldova, it's Romania, both in the gas market, it's Romanian platform, in the electricity, it's Romanian platform. But still, they are asking good questions, they are asking for support, they are asking for research. We did a lot of research. I was managing the project for comparison in Armenia, it was 10 million. In Moldova, it was 154 million project. And from that 154 million, probably about 5 million went to the research. So there is a lot of demand for research in Moldova, and I hope same will be in Armenia. And I should say that capacity of the research, local capacity, in Armenia is higher. We are lucky to have American University with research centers, with Acopian Center. We are very lucky to have Energy Institute with a good capacity, strategic center, the overall Energy Institute, Polytechnic University. So we have a great research capacity, but there is a gap between the policymakers' demand for research, use of the results of research. In Moldova, that's much better, because there are also advisors sitting there. We had the USAID advisor, Romanian advisors, EU advisor, energy community each year reviewing their kind of the overall sector, demands, etc. That formulates the kind of need for research. Everything to some extent real-world research-driven, I should say.
So research agenda production there was an institutional setup for it. So you generated this agenda for research.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So we will come back. I think Mr. Genoa, do you want to say something?
Some additional ideas for the young researchers. Diana mentioned least cost, but today much more interesting for Armenia should be the new ideology, the optimization of the final cost of the energy, or cost of energy to the final consumers. This is the new methodology which should be used by our young. Least cost is little bit old methodology. The second one, very important issue which should be taken in consideration when we are talking about energy security. Usually we mean the balance of the energy in the country, but it is also very important to guarantee the capacity balance in the country. It is also come in Armenia from the developing of the solar energy. We have huge production of the solar energy in the day hours, and we have big problem with the supply electricity in the peak time of the our power system, which is in the from the 20 to 22 hour in the day, where we haven't sun. And it is again show us importance of the energy storage. But I will show tomorrow that from the cost-benefit analysis point of view, it is not benefit for our consumers. This is complicated questions which should be also. And the last one, which I could mention, that it is the stability of the power grid. When we develop the renewable energy sources, we should consider, especially solar or wind energy, we should consider that we need in our power sector so-called speed reserve. It is the reserve which we have in the speeding facilities, which is usually thermal power plants and nuclear power plants, but not solar one.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Agarmazian, if we could come to you, Polytechnic University is the engineering university of the country. It has been for a very long time, and so what is it doing in supporting this knowledge generation needed for to enable the energy transition for the country, and also energy security aspects? And what could it do more, and what would it take to do more?
Thank you. National Polytechnic University plays a leading role in Armenia's energy sector. For decades, it has trained most of the professionals working in electricity, power plants, and energy systems. It is the only university in Armenia where students can study thermal, nuclear, electrical power engineering, renewable energy, efficiency and management. We also host two centers of excellence, the Schneider Electric Center focused on smart energy solutions, and the Nuclear Safety and Security Center with regional recognition. In terms of infrastructure, we have the largest university solar station in Armenia, over 500 kilowatts. It produces more than 700,000 kilowatts hour of electricity per year. When we reach 750 kilowatts, we will cover all the university's energy needs. The solar plants at our university also works as a laboratory for students, not only in energy and electrical engineering, also for IT and automation students as well. On 24th of July, 2 days ago, STREACS participants and our guests, colleagues visiting our campus will see our solar plants firsthand. Overall, Polytechnic University is a great place to build future programs focused on energy transition and security.
Thank you very much. And if you had this magic wand, and we'll start with Diana, poof, you have capacity. what capacity you want to see in Armenia in research?
First of all, I would like that Institute of Energy will have fixed governmental budget share supporting government policy-driven research. So at least 50% of the budget of this institute have to come from the state with the rule that they have to do certain orders of the policy need.
So that
work.
Creates stability of
stability
demand
for this
research,
institution.
and you can hire people, you can keep
you
people.
can hire people, you can keep people, save people, save knowledge, archive knowledge, and create the school. Because I am coming through academical background. I know the value of the head of laboratory, which is creating around him the young students and this, and encouraging also the scientific work, and also encouraging from students to know where tomorrow they will work and catch pleasure from scientific work. So because it is a pleasure when you are oriented that your scientific work is valued, but also you can be financially at least satisfied with your salary to keep going this scientific work. That's why. The institute don't have fixed budget, as I know.
So your magic wand will be used for the institute?
Because we are speaking about energy.
Yes.
That's why I'm speaking about this institute. The same I can say that Polytechnic Institute have also fixed budget for scientific work. The scientific work in the universities, it's declared to be in the universities, yes, because there is intention to close scientific institutes, but to transfer to universities. But in the university also, there must be fixed budget. University also have to hunt for grants, for ideas,
well,
but they have...
The Science Committee does offer funding. Now the question is, can they focus on areas that would be related to energy security, because there is money to go and get. I mean, a lot of researchers go apply.
One thing is that they have to hunt. This culture is new culture.
Yes.
But besides this, you have to have also some stability, which is that this stability is coming from, you can build this stability. I think, for example, your university is create some stability for scientific work, but in the same time you are very active in working for grants, for international funding, for cooperation. In our national universities, this so-called, maybe it's a bad word, hunting for grants, capacity is very yet underdeveloped.
Thank you. Dr. Gununi, you have a magic wand. What will you want it to do?
The question which arises from Diana is very important. Of course, stability is very important point of for our research work. I should mention that in the frame of our strategy center activity, which is branch of our institute, maybe Vahan will explain this in more detail. But in the frame of the work of Energy Strategy Center, we prepared, we trained young specialists to deal with these issues, with working with the special tools for the developing of energy policy, like time software, but finally these young people take their PhD degree and left institute, because institute haven't possibility to keep these people inside of institute, and they left institute, and now they are work very good and very successful in the commercial, in the field of the commercial. Got with us with the commercial energy companies. It is the reality.
So in that sense, you did capacity building in the country, but you're an research institute, not there to build capacity. You're there to do research, right? So the universities are to build capacity. So a lost opportunity for the institute to build this infrastructure. Yes.
Unfortunately.
Okay. So let me just, if I could just jump over to Marina. Marina, you have also, you're coming from an academic background, I think, right? You did scientific work at some point. So what do you see going from development, science, back and forth, and government interacting? If you had a magic wand, what capacity should researchers in Armenia, research institutions in Armenia have to be able to be more effective in their work?
Yeah, I think that it should be strong links between the policymakers and the researchers. It should be two-way street, probably co-creation together, higher understanding. If I will have a magic, I will immediately raise the understanding of importance of research at the level of decision makers who are doing reforms, who are making decisions, who are coming with recommendations. All that will be based on the research, on real-time investigation, research, scenario analysis, not just make a decision, but have a scenario analysis and make a kind of decision on the real world. I was happy to see that in Moldova, when deputy ministers were in our offices probably twice a week, and we were discussing which kind of scenarios which kind of research need. There was really close cooperation, there was understanding, and there was clear formulated demand. It's not like, I don't know, US decided. Probably the only thing that we were pushing is LNG. That I should be frank. We were pushing that LNG is very beneficial. Other than that, all demand and all kind of formulation, what need to be done, which kind of research they need, it was coming from the government of Moldova, from regulator of Moldova. So I wish in Armenia that link will be kind of rebuilded, because in the past there was more close. With Vace Gaprelian, who is now dean here in American University, we had several meetings on the Least Cost Development Plan with him. He wanted to understand all the details to formulate the next question. So I wish that will come back.
Thank you. That raises a question, and Vahan, Sarkisian, if I could come to you. Who should be involved in formulating the research questions, and at what level? So, because we have very different types of research, right? We have very operational issues we want to solve. Where would you go to excite this interest in research? Who would, with your magic wand, who would you get excited? And that's part of it. Could also be private sector, and you know, it doesn't.
Sure, our experience shows that all areas of communications are important. For example, just now we still have contract with Electric Networks of Armenia, to whom we are providing many different types of analysis of the powers of distribution system. We have contract with some not tariff, standard office here is in Armenia, and we are preparing some standards, again related, last one was related to the solar panel implementations in the system. But anyway, the first...
The regulatory commission? The public services?
No, there is a standard committee or something.
I know, but do you think that they are potential client for research? The public services regulatory
PSRC,
commission?
Of course. Previously, we make some studies to Electric Networks for Armenia, which they provide to according to the request to PSRC. PSRC requesting some data, some analysis from Electrical Network of Armenia, and this analysis were done by our institute. So maybe not directly we are working for them, but we were worked for them through the Electric Networks of Armenia. But the main let's say, main office or something like this should be ministry, as mentioned Marina. Because to do some strategic analysis, to provide some scenario analysis, scenario results, we need to know how government can see or seeing the development of whole country. We are analyzing all sectors, but we need to know how the government will support for development is different directions, and we will provide the necessary recommendations, necessary analysis, how to do it in the least cost manner, or what is the best way to achieve our goals. And still we need some interactions, we need some discussions with the ministry to know what they want, to which we can provide results.
So this brings up one aspect, and I mentioned in the morning, one aspect of this project is to introduce this culture of multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary work, where you engage all the key decision makers in formulating the problem. Of course, what many of you have rightly pointed out, this has to happen much more regularly top down, not only bottom up. But nonetheless, with this project, what we're trying to do is introduce that culture of multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary research. Polytechnic, engineering students, do they get any kind of training on this kind of approaching, formulating of problems, challenges? Is there a way where universities can also better integrate this idea of how you don't sit in your office and think of a problem and try to solve it for yourself, but in fact it is much more through an engaged and multidisciplinary and multi-stakeholder, the private sector, the governments, the civil society, getting them involved in understanding the challenge that needs to be addressed. Hike, maybe.
Thank you. I think for our university, is good opportunity. This project, STREACS, to connect, to grow. Yes, next generation energy security depends not only infrastructure, but also on information flow. Energy research today, it's not just engineering, it's must include material science, policy, digital tools, economics, social behaviors, and STREACS help us to bring these disciplines together. We already work on important topics like critical minerals, critical raw materials. For example, we presented a work on Armenia's geothermal and critical raw material potential in EU conference. We research material recovery, but battery recycling and circular economy. And I think STREACS is such unique opportunity for us to connect with international researchers, improve our methods and data models, boost work in real-time monitoring, smart grids, energy storage, and this project will help us to train our researchers, develop stronger international partnership, and bring our work to a new level for Armenia and beyond.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things I think we face when we're doing research in the water sector is that a lot of the pricing, decisions, tariff decisions, a lot of the policy decisions really were not research-based. They were not doing social surveys, they were not willingness to pay, they were not doing any kind of assessment willingness to pay for this additional service as opposed to for the same service now, are you ready to pay more? Of course not. So there's a lot of room to engage and include this kind of research to make more informed policy decisions. Because the opposite is very often politicians become very conservative. They don't want to do anything that would potentially risk, a backlash, like Electric Yerevan or, the transport protests and so on and so forth that we had in Armenia. So I think this is where research, if politicians are smart, they'll use research in hedging their risks in some way, by protecting them, by understanding what people are ready for. And what I'm hoping is that with the STREACS project, we'll open these channels of communication. We have tried this before with government, where the demand came as a Swedish-funded facility to do research. Some of the projects were absorbed, the results were absorbed, like with tax authorities, with the Ministry of Territorial Administration, but many of them were not. Because very often at the government side, there's not enough capacity to absorb and digest the research that's coming to them. And this is also one of the institutional gaps, I think, that we really need to work on. So I think we don't have much time, but I maybe just open it up for a couple of questions from people. Yes, Aslan. Our early stage researchers, are you awake?
Can you hear me? Does this work? Yes, I strategically set by the microphone just in case.
We noticed.
I'm sorry, I'm just sitting here observing the last 30 years of my career, looking at energy sector and a whole conversation about supply side energy. With the exception of one mention from Polytechnic University of the word economics, just like one word. Nobody talked about demand side. Nobody talked about optimization, cost minimization. Do we really want to generate more energy? Do we know if we need another nuclear? Do we know where our demand is going to be if we actually exploited our energy efficiency potential? I'm sorry, Alan, if I had a magic wand, I know you didn't ask me, but we should look at digitizing our energy consumption data in industry which we know nothing about. We don't know much about our building sector. Our building sector data is not digitized. We're investing spontaneously based on cities' aspirations, but there's no assessment of which our worst performing buildings are and where would the money save more energy. And this, we're talking about not the electricity, but the gas that we're importing at the expense of national sovereignty. And I loved the slide in previous speaker's presentation where he put energy security in the middle, renewables on one side and energy efficiency on the other side. And that's one thing we fail to acknowledge as a fundamental, cheapest, least cost way to energy security may actually be by the way of energy efficiency. And that means looking at buildings. In Polytechnic, nobody's talking about green buildings. Nobody's talking about energy security. Nobody's talking about energy efficiency. Economics of energy wars. Nobody's talking about that. And if we're not looking at new topics of research, every topic that we talked about is last century topic that we just failed to do enough these days. But the whole scope of topics of 21st century, I mean, you heard the scary presentation in the morning. Where's cybersecurity in our research? None of you mentioned that. Please, can we make a transition to the 21st century? Understand demand-side energy management, digitalization, cybersecurity, energy trade, teach our policymakers that decisions should be economically cost-effective. Understand that energy security is also an economic problem, and it is monetized, and it has a money matter. It costs money to lose your energy security, and it can be evaluated as a fragment of your GDP. So is climate change. World Bank did an incredible job telling us that climate change will cost us 28% of our GDP. Energy security costs 60% of our GDP. And unless we can teach energy sector professionals, aside from fundamental scientists, come down from your holy grail of fundamental science and spend a little time with social scientists and humanities, embrace economics, efficiencies, and optimization, maybe we can actually have policymakers that don't just see with one eye, but open it up. I'm sorry, this is very limited, and our research, Department of Energy in the US commissioned research that focused just as much on material science on the efficiencies and optimization. And if we don't train our policymakers to see that side, the dark side of the moon, I'm sorry, we're just going to build more power plants for people that don't have to consume that energy.
Asrine for president. Thank you, Asane, for opening up those alternative directions of research that we really need to keep in mind. Can someone bring some water for her? She's very agitated. Yes. Yes, Marina, and then Diana. Yes.
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Astrid. Of course, there is a need for much more research, but I should probably Vahan will tell better because he was doing least cost. It was first of all linked to economy, linked to cost. There were scenarios with different level of energy efficiency. Energy efficiency was there. It was 8%, 25%, even more scenarios we were looking. So all that was there. Of course, probably there is a need more kind of going to the from the top to down, but it was there, and economy was there, cost was there, energy efficiency was there, but of course there is a need for much more. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very easy, politically easier to talk about building a plant than refurbishing 20,000 units. And I know, but it's partly an onus on researchers to really push the agenda. And researchers as agenda setters is something we haven't talked about, because we've been talking mostly about satisfying demand or defining the research question and then addressing it. But researchers also, especially if they are independently funded and they can have enough stability, they can also push the agenda. They can ask questions that are uncomfortable for the existing kind of system. Diana, you were going to say.
I agree with Astrid, but you mentioned that interdisciplinary approach. But we also discussed that energy sector is a servicing sector to economy, and we don't have long-term economy structure. And Mr. Genoa mentioned also that GDP structure, how you want to develop your economy, will impact your energy policy. When we are looking from the climate change perspective or green perspective, we see huge decoupling of our emissions or energy intensity from the GDP growth. So we are advertising this. It is reality. It is based on the statistical data. But it is coming spontaneously because it is service sector is taking, industry is 15% of our TPS is taking an industrial sector. The biggest sector, our most difficult sector, is housing sector and the sector of transport. And the solutions here are not so much always economical. It is much operational problems which trying to resolve, but not looking strategically. We were working with one big project of Green Climate Fund for buildings energy efficiency. You can't imagine how difficult it was to push. We put money, 20% of the covering additional cost for energy efficiency, to push, to change the design document of the kindergarten. In the end, the energy efficiency, if you will calculate, it's our money was in the total cost, it was 5%, 4% of the capex cost. But in any case, with this a lot of efforts was pushed this energy efficiency concept to enter in a kindergarten rehabilitation, as well as was difficult, but it was pushed also seismic strengthening of the kindergartens, because for the schools, ADB is doing schools. But kindergartens, nobody was taking care about seismic strengthening of this kindergartens in the repair work, because they are saying it is repair, it's not reconstruction. But we are speaking about studies. The studies are coming through the need, for the order for the demand. The question is, when we are speaking today, is always around the demand, and for demand, of course, economical analysis can be very important. And maybe also to complement to Mr. Ganuni's idea, is very important is to understand how the tariff setting for electricity, for peak hour, night hour, this can impact the consumption. Immediately will impact if this will be properly designed, very good, economically justified. the same as for the water.
Yeah, you can't make those decisions without doing social research. I mean, it's impossible.
That's why you need research. And we pushed with the Statistical Office of Armenia to go for the Armenian network that they will report by classifying consumers, because if you will classify consumers through the this NIS coding, you will be able to after analyze. We even offer them that we will finance additional people to work for classification of their consumers because they are data users. It was not possible to push, but if this order will come by the policy lab from top, unavoidably it's possible to do, because you can create your policy on exact data, as Artemat mentioned. You for individual researcher is very important access to the data, and sometimes this data how is ownership issue is very critical, and it can be said that it's confidential, and you are immediately you are unable to continue your research because this is a limiting factor, which is even I know that there is by the law, which is completely not secret now, that is not possible to publish the number of cars in Armenia because it is yet public information. But everybody knows there is insurance, everybody knows the number of the cars, but till now, legally, it is confidential information. This is absurds are coming also from this secret, okay. So this is the things that when we are speaking, and maybe a lot of times we said the policy order must be, policy understanding must be, it's coming for this. You can't from down part push a lot if you don't see that there is vertical channel to up part.
Can I just ask Mattia, maybe put you on the spot? I think you're the only European here, right? Any other Europeans here? Mattia, you're an academic. You're working in University of Genoa is publicly funded, right? And state funding comes into your institution. You have your own externally funded projects. You have your own research agenda. As a researcher, as an academic, you're pushing forward. How do you manage this and feel like you're fulfilled with your scientific mission as a researcher?
Yes, okay.
When you hear all these people say stuff, how does that compare to what you're
experiencing? It's a tough question. Let's say that every one of us has their own, let's say, research agenda as academics because of our interest and our, let's say, also the grants that we apply for, like STREACS and everything. This is energy security has been always my, one of the topics that I always loved and liked, and we did research on it. In terms of fundings, well, I heard with interest what you were saying, that every academic will ask for more fundings, always. I mean, we are eager to get more fundings at any time, and we are always understaffed. I can say that we, at least in Italy, we are not shining as in terms of public fundings, and we don't and also we don't shine in terms of links that we have between the research and the policymakers. There's still it's like you know, a wall sometimes that is difficult to get through it. No, I mean,
but you shine in working with business.
Sorry?
Right. You shine in working with private sector?
We work with private sector, even if probably more at the European level than at a local level. But yes, we work as academics, and also from a capacity building point of view, we have a lot of connections with local industries, technologies. Well, I'm an engineer, so most of them are engineering companies, or at least something related to. And we do a lot of work together with the students. We provide, I think, a service to our students as a a kind of capacity building platform in which the student can actually learn what to do and what they do on the job. So that is our role. Is what I find challenging is to link research and teaching involving private company. This is something that is quite challenging.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Sorry?
Can you explain that? What do you mean?
Well, it's difficult to find. It's difficult to find, let's say, synergies. Let's talk about synergies between the research that we do, especially that one that is more focused on, or at least the target audience is more, let's say, policymaker with industry. So it's very difficult to get industry companies involved in this kind of project in which we have research and capacity building. They are always more interested in practical research that have a short-term, let's say, return from an economic point of view, from a business point of view. Something that is a long-term, that when you start talking about energy savings or, let's say, policy maker, at even industrial policy policy development for saving energy, which then in turn leads to saving money because they are connected, is something that we find quite challenging. So it's very easy for us, just to conclude, it's very easy for us to get, let's say, agreement with these companies to send students, maybe to have some work to do together from a capacity building point of view. It's easy to get them involved in practical research, applied research. It's more difficult to involve them in multidisciplinary project with, let's say, a wider, let's say, perspective, which involves different disciplines. This is something that I personally, maybe someone else says no, but this is what I find.
And that you will get if you can get the public sector to be your client, because then you need to address much more complex challenge than just simply one solution to.
What we do, that's why actually we work a lot in the European framework, because it allows us to create a project in which we can merge academia, industry, policymakers and public sector all together. So these kind of projects are very useful. So we leverage a lot on the European framework, be it the Horizon Europe like this one, can be the Erasmus Plus project, can be the LIFE program. So we have different frameworks in which allow us to do what the Italian government or the public sector, the private sector, I mean, it's difficult to do in other ways.
Thank you. Any final comments from our panelists? Yes.
I think we must amplify our academic voice. Research is not a luxury. In the context of energy security, it's a necessity. And I think for our early stage researchers, there are a lot of opportunity to represent our need and capacity of our country.
Thank you very much. That's very well said. And our early stage researchers and more will be participating in 3-4 more days of summer school, where we're actually, by the end of it, we'll be formulating research questions around the big topics that was on the proposal, 4 big areas. And that should be very interesting also to go through this multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary approach to define the challenge and to do the research. And we're hoping also for a lot of these, and I hope this is not news for people, that we'll have a client for this research project. So we will be doing this for someone and not only for ourselves. So hopefully we'll be able to pull that off and set an example of how to do research that has impact. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.